This conference will now be recorded.
Thank you, my assistant. So let's start right in. We'll do introductions, not now. We've got close to 30 people on the call. And again, welcome. Thanks for giving us your time here this afternoon. We're slated to run till about 2 o'clock. But do introduce yourself, your name and organization when you speak, when we get to the part in just a couple of minutes where you're going to take the floor so that we can hear who's here and who's talking easily. So 3 questions, and if you're viewing the screen, you'll see them. If not, I'll read them. 1, how are you adapting your climate resilience work in the COVID-19 emergency? What tips do you have for others? 2, how can BayCAN help and support you in the next few weeks and months? And finally, we'll talk a little bit about one of the first things that's come out publicly about combining climate resilience and the pandemic, which is some work that's being done on wildfires, looking ahead to our fire season and the kinds of shelter-in-place regulations we now have with COVID-19. So that is our thing. I'm going to stop sharing my screen since it's not really important to see it. And nice to see some of you here, and any of you that have cameras and want to turn them on, we'll be happy to see your faces and your places, your temporary places of work. If my 14-month-old grandson starts banging on the door, we'll bring him in for a minute too, since this is his future and our future. So first question, how are you doing? How are you adapting your work? Do you have any tips for anyone else? And I can start that one by just saying we had a big workshop last week that we did with UC Berkeley and with Berkeley Lab that was planned to be 40 people in person from around the country. Well, 3 weeks ago, we saw the writing on the wall and made it a virtual workshop, which a number of the scientists were, I don't think, quite used to that kind of large scale, not in-person workshop. And it worked quite well. And I think 2 things that I would pass along as tips. 1, we did a test of the equipment the day before for people that didn't feel comfortable. We were using Zoom, and we made sure people's microphones and cameras and other things, and the things behind them on the wall maybe were things they wanted everybody in the Western Hemisphere to see or not. So testing equipment and all ahead of time was good, and we cut it down. We were supposed to do 2 8-hour sessions, 2 days in a row. We cut it down, as some of you have learned, I think, too. Online is a little harder and more draining. We had a 4-hour session one day and a 4.5 the next. And between those 2 things, it really got people, and having cameras helped. It was the first time I'd been in something that used everybody on camera pretty much, or almost everyone. And it did help because it gave you a little more, as we spanned across the globe or across the country, people you haven't met before and you hadn't worked with. The face obviously going with the audio gave a bit of a warmth, I'd say, to it. So that's me leading off. Who wants to go next? I see some familiar faces here. Dana, how's your working going, and what tips would you have for anybody for this kind of COVID-19 emergency work?
Thanks for calling me out, Bruce. We're doing actually really well. Many of you will see that I just literally about 2 minutes ago sent out the announcement that Art Bay Area is finally publicly released. So I think we've been working towards that, and now we have to figure out how we work after that era. But I think we've been spending a lot of time online. We've been using a lot of video meetings like this. We've been checking in more frequently. We're doing a virtual hour tonight. So for us, the work is pretty much business as usual. It's just the way that we're working is changing.
Great, good. And again, even if I call you out by name, thank you, Dana, introduce yourself to the crowd. So if you would, just at the back end there, Dana.
Oh, sorry, I'm Dana Breckwald, the Adapting to Rising Tides Program Manager at SFBCDC.
Great, thank you. We're getting a little background noise, so please, can you mute your phone or mute your computer, please? So, David, I see you right here in the middle of the Hollywood Squares kind of diagram here. So, David Bihar, what tips would you give others, or what have you found for adapting your work for this new setup?
Well, first, I'm David Bihar, Climate Program Director of the San Francisco PUC and Chair of the Steering Committee of BayCAN. And I would echo what you said, Bruce, about the Zoom meetings with the Hyperfacets project last week. It was actually right at the beginning of my telecommuting time, and it was a huge relief and a fabulous thing. It was really well managed. It was seamless, and it was great to see everybody. I thought it was very interactive. I'm talking to my daughter about how she feels about how it's working in college because they're using Zoom in college. She doesn't seem as thrilled yet, but maybe that they're not using all the functionality and that I think you can get from these tools. My work is impacted by just being at home and working at home and the challenges of doing that and organizing yourself in a different environment that can be challenging. I'm part of an international paper, actually leading an international paper on sea level rise planning around the world, which involves a survey, which we're going to suspend because we don't think that a survey is going to produce much output from the local jurisdictions that we're surveying, and so the project has to delay. We heard on the other WUCA call, the other BayCAN call that I was on, that people are concerned about public outreach requirements as connected to grants and other projects. That's obviously something that can't go on in the same way and potentially at all. And how are people adjusting their grant schedules, their reporting schedules to accommodate that? I thought that was a very interesting finding. And other than that, it's keeping on with all of the projects and the things to-do list. And I'm hoping to have more time to read, because I always find it hard to read when I'm in the office and need to do more here. That's my main change that I'm looking for right now.
Excellent. Thanks, David. I see some others, so let me just call on a few people and then we'll open it up. Zoe Siegel, Greenbelt Alliance. How's this changing your work, and what tips might you have for any of us to make it work?
Hi, everyone. Zoe Siegel, Director of Special Projects at Greenbelt Alliance. I'm not sure if I have any tips. I think, we're in the middle of a strategic planning process and beginning to think about how to reorient our work or kind of what this means for our strategic direction moving forward. We were also planning on moving April 1st, so that's no longer happening. But I'm getting used to working from home. Oh, I really liked the cat that just walked across the screen. Yeah, that's all for me.
Okay, thanks. Let's open it up. So it could be a little free for all here, but got something to share that you think might be helpful to the group in terms of something you've learned and seen already about how to combine kind of the climate resilience and adaptation work, maybe combine or adapt it under the COVID-19 context here. So anyone unmute yourself and jump in, identify yourself, and we'll go from there.
This is Nahal from also SFBCDC. This is not exactly to, getting at your question with the combining COVID-19 with our climate resilience work, but I just wanted to share that something that has been really kind of like instilling this like a positive sense in me in an otherwise not so positive time is that I have a great team to lean on. And I wanted to just mention that, as we're adapting and as we're learning how to use this new technology, it's offering more opportunities for us to help each other. And so Jackie, for example, helped me send out a constant contact email that you might have seen, save the date for a project we're working on. I apologize if you got 5 of those, but still learning. And also Steve Goldbeck, one of our executive staff, reached out to me to help him with WebEx on Monday at our all staff call. And I just felt like that was, it's not as common for him to come to me for help with something. So it was a nice feeling.
No, that's good. And, something I think we've probably all seen if you have and true for life in general here, but especially also for our work, if you have a good setup to begin with, then you get, when we get in trouble like this, when we have a real big emergency of any sort, personal or professional, or in this case, global, you're in much better shape because you've got that set up to begin with, and you don't have to make it up quickly. Who else wants to jump in and offer something for our group? How's it going? And got any tips for others in terms of dealing with all of this?
Can I add one more thing, Bruce?
Sure.
Real quick. I think one thing, and I wrote this in sort of the cover letter that went out with Art Bay Area, is I think that there's sort of some hope that we will, I mean, it's sort of sad to say that it's hope, but there's some thought that we will realize that we're not as immune to bad things as we thought as a culture, and spend some time actually contemplating the fact that change is going to happen and change will happen, and our world can sort of turn on its head in, you know, in this case, it happened literally overnight, it felt like, but it can also happen in a slow move way with climate change. And you know, I think that we've seen a lot of people who are responding to that by personally contributing and making some change in the way that they conduct their day-to-day lives and the decisions that they make about how they participate in society. And to me, that's hopeful for the climate conversation, in that we can be problem solving. And, you know, we are reactive a lot, and I think we've seen that in the case of many other events, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way, because with sea level rise and climate change, it's not going to come out of left field. It's not going to emerge in, you know, 1 month from some chance virus that jumped from an animal to a human. You know, we know how to prepare for it. And so I'm hoping that we can take some lessons from the fact that, you know, we have been thrown for a loop for this, but we are able to, or hopefully, knock on wood, able to respond in a way that improves our outcomes for our society.
Great, thank you, Dana. So we really now can have 3 questions here, and you can answer any one of the 3 or all. One is this idea of, you have tips for other people about how the working remotely and working differently than you probably have before is working for you, and things you might pass along. And secondly, how can BayCAN help you? If you have an idea of something we could do over the next few weeks, we had a few from the webinar yesterday that were helpful, that we'll be compiling. And this third one that Dana just brought up, how do you think this work is linked to our work on climate resilience, or how would you link it? And how are you talking about it, maybe with others in your office or elsewhere? So I'll call on Hannah. Hannah, your camera just came up, so introduce yourself to the group and then fire away.
Oh, thanks. Well, it's really nice to see everybody. And I'm Hannah Duress. I'm at the County of San Mateo on the climate team at Office of Sustainability. And one of the things that's really on my mind right now is really the suffering in our socially vulnerable communities. And so one of the things that we've been doing, and I must say that our capacity is limited, but we're just doing the best that we can to call, email, or in the course of our normal outreach and communications to ask our community partners how they're doing and what's going on, and then to whatever extent we can to just connect them to any resources that might be helpful, even if it's out of our lane. This is definitely, you know, I think a tension that we all, well, I don't know about all, but I guess in government, we often experience this tension between, we have a work plan, we're working on planning processes or policies or things that have a fairly structured arena, and then we're partnering with community organizations, many of whom are extremely vulnerable, and they are facing really crazy stuff right now. So happily, our board just approved $3 million in relief support that is targeted to individuals, businesses, nonprofits. That's great. And I think, you know, it's just really hard. It's kind of, I guess I would say, like, emotionally painful. for me not to be able to do more. And I think also for me, I really see a continuum between the here and now and the disaster preparedness and response aspects that are, we're seeing right now in real time and in very painful ways, to this like climate future and the solutions that we're trying to bring, as well as the longer term risks. So I am really thinking a lot about like how can we support both areas. We're definitely having a conversation about it in terms of some funding we're gonna be releasing, and kind of like how soon should we release the funding, and how much any change should we have any change to our funding guidelines to like respond to the situation, and how should we do that? So it's not fully decided, but we're having a good conversation about it. Yeah, and I just think, like it's just hard to hear like, hey, we heard in a previous planning process not that long ago that, hundreds of Latino community members needed emergency backpacks. We haven't, it's not technically my job to get the backpacks, but I'd like to get the backpacks. I have no idea how to get the backpacks. I don't, there's a million other needs. Like, how can I help these communities and build their capacity so that they can continue to weather these storms? Many of them are going to get hit by the PSPS. They're going to potentially get hit by fires or smoke. There's all kinds of compounding issues. So anyway, that was a lot, but just sharing.
Thank you. Thank you, Hannah. One thing I'll throw in is that if you were following the Sacramento budget starting in January with Newsom's proposed climate resilience budget, which moved some money around, but also put new money in for adaptation and resilience. I mean, we were quite heartened to see it. And there are a number of legislators now. Some of us were up in Sacramento a few weeks ago, last in-person meetings we had, I think, looking at some of the new legislation proposed. And there's a lot of interest, and I'm sure some of you have seen this, from the legislature in climate adaptation and resilience now. It's not all money going to GHG reduction. We like it that they're spending a lot of money on GHGs, but for the first time, there were proposals for things called regional resilience coordinators. Those were in the governor's proposed budget. There was money for local planning. There was money for local projects. There were a number of new things that were going to be helpful, including a climate resilience bond that was proposed, if it got through the legislature, which it probably would, to go on our ballot in November. And unfortunately, all of those are with a big question mark now as we've entered into the pandemic emergency in terms of the state's budget. City and county budgets are different, but the state budget is going to take a big hit. And so all we've heard from our folks in Sacramento is just stand by. There's a lot of interest in all of the climate work, but right now, the questions about both the state budget and about asking voters in November to approve, say, a bond issue for climate resilience are big question marks, and we'll know more, obviously, as this goes along. So who's next? Who would like to jump in and answer any of our three questions? How can BayCAN help you? How's this working to be in the emergency and be talking about climate with people? How are you making that connection? And just if you have tips about how you're working.
I'm happy to jump in.
Oh, go, Susan. I already spoke.
Great. This is Susan Silver. I work at the Northern California Resilience Network along with Yeshi. And yeah, a couple of things. We're finding that we're really needing to check in with people in terms of how they're doing. Emotionally, people are just, it was a big shock to people's systems. So just taking a little bit more time to do that. And in terms of the work that we're doing, this is really making our work come alive for us. Our focus has been local resilience, and it's been working with local community-based organizations around
resilience, especially with our site-based project, which is resiliency hubs. So we're really focused on working with some of the hubs, supporting them to scale up their gardens because, just to increase food security, and have been redistributing funding for those projects, and really seeing the huge need to bring funds for community organizers. There's so many people that are working on mutual aid and resiliency work and volunteering their time. And we're seeing that so many people are just doing so much work as volunteers where there could be, funding coming that way, jobs as community organizers. So we're seeing this work show how important it is, and integrating the climate solutions with the resiliency through, for example, the community gardens. So.
Great, thank you, Susan. Let me just note that if you hear someone or see them talking here in this hour, and you can't find their contact information easily and you want to contact them, send an email to me or to Yeshi Sauls at BayCAN, and we will link you with whomever the speaker was. Who's next?
This is Nahal. I'll be really quick. Sorry. I just wanted to say, actually getting kind of like chiming in on Susan's comment. I think that the issue of realizing the level of anxiety that the general public is feeling, and knowing that it's something that we've also talked about in climate resilience. And so I think that the fact that we're still able to keep, as Dana mentioned, we're sticking to business as usual, but just transforming our way of doing it. I think that there's a fine line that we need to be trying to balance there, because I think if we're too strict with business as usual, we're not really addressing that anxiety. We're suppressing the anxiety, not letting ourselves feel it and process it, which could come back and bite us in the butts later on. And so I just want to acknowledge that if you're in a position to go gentle on your staff or on your family members and just be really gentle with one another, that gives people time and space to process these feelings of anxiety. And one way of doing that is if there's a project timeline that's a really rapid turnaround, I would recommend considering extending timelines for one. And the other comment is getting at what Hannah said, or actually, Bruce, you both were talking about the funding aspect. And I wanted to point out that just last night I saw on the news a young woman in Nob Hill that's using Nextdoor, the app, to make sure that her elderly neighbors are getting their groceries. And she said 300 young people in her neighborhood have already signed up to volunteer. So they're well staffed for, volunteers to just go get groceries and other supplies for elderly and other people that are high risk. So Great. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Nahal. Excellent. We heard another voice there just as Nahal was starting. Who'd like to go next?
It's Alex Gaines here from so update on this is just health in general. Heading into this crisis, my health wasn't doing so well. So I actually had to step away from the World Institute on Disability. So right now I'm luckily have felt a little bit more rested, and really encourage everybody else to look out for your own just physical and mental health through all of this. It's so important, with a virus going around, but working from home, working a more flexible schedule again for health. And I actually, moving forward, should have a little bit more bandwidth to focus on Bay Area related things. So happy to be here as a resource for everybody, and connecting and reaching out to the disability community as well.
Great, thank you, Alex. Excellent. Who's next?
Can I go?
Sure.
This is Warner with San Francisco Estuary Institute. A couple of things. We're an organization with 75 staff that suddenly has 75 branch offices. And one of the things that we recognize is probably about close to a third of our staff are people that are two professionals at home with one or more children or dealing with elder care. So the pressure that's on them, especially those that are at the lower income level that have a smaller living space with multiple children, are sort of like at the extreme level. And we recognize that the bottom line is that they're just not going to be able to be as productive as possible. So we've asked our more senior people to donate all of their vacation time or as much of their vacation time as they want to, entirely on a voluntary basis. As the CEO, I've tried to do the largest thing to set the example so that we can take our staff that are under the most amount of pressure and say, if you can only work 30 hours a week but need to bill for 40, use this vacation time to backfill. And the number of people that volunteered, as you might expect, was instantaneous and overnight. So at least we're able to provide for caring for those people that are under the maximum amount of stress in their household. The second thing we did was someone said, all right, we're spread around the Bay Area. What if someone gets sick? What if someone needs something? We know that there's a ton of tools out there, like Nahal was just talking about, Nextdoor and others, but we created our own very simple tool, sort of a map-based tool, where we listed like a half a dozen things that you could do to help somebody, and then people who wanted to volunteered where they live. So you can just quickly look at a map to see who lives where, and to be able to volunteer or to be able to make an inquiry sort of confidentially, so not everybody else is looking at it, to say, I'm sick, I'm home alone. Could someone, as Nahal said, could provide or whoever said it, to provide groceries or run an errand or walk a dog or do whatever. So we created this thing, we called it Care in the Time of Corona. And we're about to send it out to everybody to say, if you've got someone that's a little tech savvy, because it requires using free available existing Google Sheets and tools to create this for your own group, whether it's your neighborhood, your church, your school, your online community, your company, or whatever. And we're going to distribute that around. Again, we recognize humbly that there are probably 20 tools out there, but this is something that specifically worked for us and was easy to do for our folks. So those are two things we did. One question that I have, and a need, is I realize from my own experience of having two people at home and living in a small space that's a loft space that doesn't have multiple rooms, I'm suddenly kind of shopping for what are the best sort of earphones, headsets that enable you to talk while you're blocking out sound from somebody else that's a housemate that is also on a conference call, 20 feet away. So if anyone has suggestions on what's the best for that, I'm sure I haven't even started that search yet, but that's one thing I realize I want to use some limited amount of funds to provide those types of headsets for people that are working at home, where there's two people at home trying to do work also with kids in the background. So that's
excellent. Thank you, Warren.
Need.
Yeah, very, very nice. I've always used headsets.com for my various assorted things over the years, and I'm not on their payroll, but they've always been helpful with a wide selection of things for the home office. Who's next? How about Kim Springer? Kim, you're down the peninsula. What do you got to offer in terms of what could BayCAN do? How are you adapting your work? Any of those questions?
Well, I haven't been a telecommuter really at all. So this is kind of a whole new game for me. So slowly sourcing in the various pieces to make my space a little bit more ergonomic. I think one of the things that's interesting is I think maybe others may be running into this too. There's kind of a tendency to kind of hunker down and stay focused and spend a lot of time in the house. And, being at work gets you up and moving around and socializing with other people. So in some ways it feels a little isolating. And I know that of course, others in the family are feeling the same way. So just, I think, remembering to get out and to get into nature, go for a walk where it's safe, and get some sunlight and breathe, and just take care of ourselves, just kind of our own sort of self-resilience is, I think it's really important. I'm also kind of really a music lover, and you know, it tends to open up emotions and you know, give an opportunity for release. And so there's some really great recordings and live stuff on YouTube that I've been thinking about sharing with people that I think are really songs that are really applicable to the moment. So you know, a little bit of time just rocking out, I think is worthwhile. Is worthwhile.
Excellent.
Yeah, I kind of on the other end of things, you know, I've always said that, you know, and I know we're talking about resilience, but you know, and I've been so heavily focused on the mitigation side for so long. I've always really said that, you know, there are a lot of really bigger hammers, and I really had thought of, you know, for reducing emissions, and I thought, you know, the bigger hammers were things like PAVLI, you know, fuel standards and those kinds of things. Not that the individual work that we do locally isn't important, but boy, this is a big hammer. I mean, I'm thinking, you know, who's looking at the traffic counts right now, you know, when you're in extreme mode of people telecommuting as opposed to going to work. Just how low can it go? And is it worth, you know, taking a look at that and really recording it? And so anyway, those are my thoughts.
Good. Yes, I think, you know, I think you could make a safe bet that some companies will find that this works better for organizations than they ever thought it would, and it forced them over the hump. I remember working with old Pac Bell's telecommuting work team. This was probably 25 years ago or more, and their slogan was, "The office is where we go to be interrupted." You know, and now those interruptions can be really nice and social and all, but I remember that was the first inkling I ever got from people that were, these guys and gals at Pac Bell were working remotely many years ago. Who's next? Who'd like to offer something here?
This is Julie from Palo Alto. I'll just chime in with a couple of things. In our city, a couple of things that I'm seeing effective is we have planned daily updates from our city manager and executive officers about corona issues of the day, and a similar email that goes out to the public every day that people can subscribe to, along with the usual communication channels of web pages and Nextdoor and all those types of things. And those have been really effective with all the day-to-day updates that are going on. Really still our organization, especially in my office where we've got a number of people who are inspectors and are primarily in the field, we're still getting our legs under us for remote learning. And a lot of last week was just getting those tools in place for some people who some of them may have not really even done a webinar before. And so having to get them VPN and remote phone access and just navigate that for a number of folks. And so we're getting there, but those have been some of the more immediate challenges and goals that we've had. The other thing as an organization that has been taking a number of time is to figure out is how we compensate people, because traditionally, if someone has to go home to take care of their kid, you have to use one of several pops of leave, whether it's sick leave or vacation or this or that. And you know, we've got a force majeure going on right now, but we didn't have an administrative process set up to pay people for something like that. And so right now what the city is doing for folks who've got kids, what they're leaning towards and what I've asked them to do is to allow flex time so that people, like during the day, when my daughter's got lunchtime from school, I can go outdoors and I can play with her. And then you just flex your time. And then for some people who just are not able to flex enough, or they just don't have jobs where they can just do work at home, and this is in like other divisions, like maybe mechanics that work on the fleet, that type of thing, they are just getting paid administrative leave, which I think is a really big deal for our organization. So I think that that's a new tool that's been helpful. Some folks were asking about other tools that might be shared, and we were talking about webinars. I just got an interesting email from someone today about how hand signals are used during webinars to indicate the kind of question you have or to get group feedback. And I'll send this to Yeshi and Bruce, and you guys want to distribute that. It might be helpful to some folks who are using more online webinars these days. So that's it for now.
Better unmute myself there. Thank you, Julie. Corey from Santa Fe, you're in the queue and you're right on right now.
Oh, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Alrighty. So first of all, I appreciate you talking about the state budget. I think things are going to be dramatically different by the end of this. And I know our city, we're going to, most cities, I think, their budgets are going to be hit big time. And I think our San Rafael landscape with all the little mom and pop stores is really going to change. It's really hard for them. So it's going to be a huge disruption for a long time. One of the things that two things that I think might be helpful for BayCAN is one very small thing for me is I've been looking for a good grants assessment sort of spreadsheet that would have a lot of information, like, how much of a matching grant, what are some of the basic requirements, and just a spreadsheet that I could use to populate with all the sort of grants and funding opportunities are out there, so that I can add some columns of my own that are specific to San Rafael to be able to sort of, in a snapshot, understand what grants might be helpful and when, and whether they're recurring or once. So that's a small thing. And then in the larger sense, to what Hannah was talking about, I think that post-event, or maybe as we go, cataloging all the ways, all the lessons learned in terms of social equity in our vulnerable communities, not only lessons learned, but sort of what things were set up to work right, so that other people can utilize them, or what things got set up during the event that wasn't there initially, but became very helpful. I'm just seeing that in our community as it's really exposing the vulnerabilities. It's really showing, okay, yeah, this is how it's really going to hurt people that are lower income or that don't speak English or that have vulnerabilities in terms of health or social isolation or whatever.
Thank you, Corey. Excellent as always. We have a couple of folks, Martha and Nixon, both on the line that work with us at SFO. And if you're looking outside your own window at any point, you can tell that SFO is taking one of the biggest hits already in this last month or two. Martha and Nixon, either of you want to add something here about how your work is going, things you could use from BayCAN?
This is Martha. I don't know where Nixon, if Nixon's still on. No, I mean, I've been off 10 days, I guess, something like that from SFO. We basically started out with sort of the vulnerable population being able to work from home, and then it, went from there. Being in government affairs, my stuff that I deal with, the state issues, is fairly easy to do from home. A lot of the events were initially canceled. Now I find that, people are now kind of coming back and scheduling these remote meetings, and people are finding that, yes, they can work fairly well. And at SFO, of course, as long as the planes are going up and down, we're happy. And unfortunately, they're not going up and down as much as they normally do. And the good news for SFO, as many as employees as we have, as of yesterday, I think we had no employees that we know of testing positive for coronavirus, and we have a lot of employees. There were some TSA people, but not SFO employees. I know there, with us, there's a lot of complex issues because, you have the airlines, you have passengers, you have the concession people who work at the airport. And so we have a skeletal team at SFO who are dealing with all of those challenges because, of course, the concessionaires want to be compensated in some way or to reduce work hours or have their rent reduced or whatever the issues may be. And our senior business team is working on that. As well as everybody knows, we're like the Golden Gate Bridge. We're always in construction. We never are stagnant. And so one of the things that our director has said is the projects that are currently being happening will continue to build and happen, but the ones that are scheduled to start at some point in the future will be delayed. Of course, the airport was hopeful that this new stimulus package was going to include some help for airports, and my understanding is there was something in there for airports. But I don't know the particulars of it. Ivar has been very good about, our director, updating us about what's going on at the airport fairly regularly. And for tomorrow, for instance, he's on a webinar to all the employees that want to tune in, and he gives updates on what's happening at the airport and what any city announcements or what's happening with the airlines or whatever. So we get a fairly up-to-date briefing constantly on what's happening at the airport. So that has been very, very helpful. And Ivar has made it very clear he is very committed to helping and being mindful of the situation the employees are in, and that he's very reassuring about making sure the employees know that he was going to do everything he can to keep everyone on and everyone working and all of that. So that has been, I think, helpful to people's mental health. And so I think that's it, unless Nixon's on and has any other issues that I can't recall. But that's it for off the top of my head.
Thank you, Martha. Thank you very much. A couple of things from BayCAN. One, our next set of sub-regional meetings, where we go North Bay, Central Bay, South Bay, are coming up April 13, 14, 15. And we'll be sending out further notice about those. They will obviously be virtual. You could actually join any of them or all three, but we would hope to see you for one of those. They're slated for 2 hours, probably following the GoToMeeting rules or Zoom rules. It'll probably be 90 minutes. We'll see. But that'll be Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. We start in the South Bay on Monday, North Bay Tuesday, and Central Bay on Wednesday. We're also doing personal consultations. Yeshi and I have done a couple. We did PG&E this morning. We're doing Alameda County this afternoon. We did East Bay Regional Parks and HASPA earlier this week. So we're doing those. And if you'd like to book a consultation, they're half an hour to an hour with us, where we can find out more specifically how we can help your organization. Please drop me an email and sign up for one. Yeah, she's got the equity working group going. David Bihar is starting the A to A group, from adaptation or from assessment to adaptation, focusing on sea level rise. And we're going to be picking up the work again soon on the PSPS that we started a while back. So those are some things from BayCAN, but we have a few minutes. We could also hear from you if you have something specific that you would like from BayCAN over the next few weeks that would help with this. And the one other thing I'll mention is that, and this maybe partially answers that question. we could, and we are starting based on yesterday's webinar, a list of things where people are actually talking about climate adaptation and resilience work and the pandemic kind of together, and seeing links, as some of you have talked about, or seeing ways to talk to the public about both in a sensitive way. We have a webinar that was done in Canada on this subject. We have the work that the state is doing that we're somewhat aware of now on looking at the wildfire season and COVID-19 and how the regulations for those two things and PSPS could eventually run into each other. So that's one thing that we heard yesterday on the call, that people would like us to kind of keep a news list of those things, maybe by email for all of you. But we have a couple minutes left, and if you have anything that you'd really like us to focus on with BayCAN, we appreciate your support for us, and we appreciate helping, being able to help you. So a couple minutes. Yeah, Hannah. Yes.
Oh, I just wanted to say that any resources for short-term funding that would help us do things that are aligned to resilience that combines COVID and longer-term resilience optimally, but really any resources at all would be great. I would really like to, you know, especially get those resources to our community partners and nonprofits. And then, you know, some of those partners are completely dependent on in-person efforts, like going and working in the schools, and all of those contracts I think are pretty much off. So we could definitely see some of our, you know, like our local businesses, our small organizations, even maybe bigger organizations failing at this time. So just want to do everything that we can to support our ecosystem so we can continue to be resilient.
Good, will do. You know, Yeshi's putting together, we've done 3 now monthly newsletters that are really good. We could, if it was helpful, step those up so there may be some shorter ones, you know, during the month, that kind of thing. Who else got an idea for us of something we could do to help you?
Bruce, it's Martha. I just wanted to note that, you know, we're going to have an additional challenge for, I was on another webinar this morning with the Bay Area Council, and there was a business expert on there, and they were talking about that businesses and entities should be prepared for 12 to 18 more months of this, basically, because she said until we could expect that there's going to be a lot of business disruption until a vaccine has developed, which is anticipated 12 to 18 months. So the idea that we're thinking in terms of weeks instead of, you know, many months may be a focus. And as a result of that, one of the challenges I think we have, and maybe BayCAN will have, is to keep sea level rise, climate change, and the resulting immediacy of those needs at the forefront too, because this pandemic is going to really swallow the vast majority of all interest of people in general, the press and everybody else. And it will be hard to get, you know, attention on these other issues. And even though people believe climate change is upon us and very important, that this other thing now has taken over a complete immediacy.
Yeah. Thank you, Martha. Very, very good point. Who else?
Bruce, this is Warner again. I'd like to add one thing. I think exactly what you're doing right now is a reflection of what we need. You and I have both seen, and everybody on this call has seen it in the last 2 years, almost an explosion of effort of people trying to coordinate and collaborate across communities. The next 6 months is going to be a master class for all of us in that. I do think that there is a ton of information on the internet and tools that might be helpful to people, whether it's tips for working at home or whether it's a good, concise analysis of what's in either the Pelosi bill or the Senate bill that actually directly helps nonprofits or whatever. If people have something that they come across that they think is an especially good resource, could send it to Bruce or Yeshi so that you could just post on the site. But here's some of the best resources we've seen, because there's a flood of things out there. Half of them are not very helpful. Some are very helpful. So this network, this is a networking organization. So using the network of you being able to repost things that are tips and helpful, because how we tackle and do the coordination and collaboration in the next 6 months is just going to lay the foundation for the type of coordination we're going to then be doing for the next 5 to 10 years.
Good, thanks, Warner. I think Yeshi and I will look at the website. We have the BayCAN website, and I think, you know, with emails and all driving traffic to a section maybe that we could create on the website, that might be the most efficient way to do it without overwhelming people, because I guarantee you, while we've been on this call for an hour, you'll look in your inbox and there'll be 14 or 40 emails. Somebody's proposing something to help with all this. So got a couple more minutes. Dana? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry if you said this. It's hard to pay 100% attention all the time when there are kids walking in the room. It's something that also would be really helpful is just tracking how this is impacting state funding and underfunding sources for climate adaptation. Because obviously, you know, we had all anticipated this magic bond that would fix everything, and now it's really up in the air. So just keeping that conversation going and thinking about how it will impact planning and implementation over the next months and years, I think would be really valuable as well.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dana. Who's next?
Hey, Bruce, this is Kim. I wanted to chime in. I've actually moved into the bathroom here because my wife and son are singing and playing guitar. So, so one of the things that we're doing is, you know, certainly on the side of resilience to some degree, you know, on energy, but also in efficiency, is that we're pushing out opportunities for trainings. So anything that we can find that teaches people about heat pump water heaters or education, you know, so, you know, from BayCAN, maybe it would be helpful to think about the things that we can do in the interim where everybody is refocused on other things to keep people, to get them up to speed, provide consulting opportunities. I think there's a host of work that we can continue to do even though that we're in the midst of this. There's nothing says that you can't go out with RFPs, you know, scope out work that needs to be done. Maybe BayCAN putting together a list of, like, maybe these are the things that we can focus on even though we're in the midst of this. Maybe that would be helpful. Bruce, you're muted.
I managed to hit the wrong button on my computer there for a minute. Thank you, Kim. Others? A couple more minutes. Great, famous last words from anyone? Okay.
Hi, this is Nixon.
Oh, yeah.
I finally figured out my audio problem, so I just wanted to let everybody know that I was listening. I am on, and I think Martha covered what I wanted to say or would have said earlier. Thank you.
Thank you, Nixon. Good luck with SFO. So thank you all very much. Oh yeah, go ahead. Who's there?
Oh, hey, Bruce, it's Danielle from San Mateo County.
Hi, Danielle.
Quick thought for you guys.
Yeah.
We've been engaging with our Emergency Operations Center, and at some point they're going to kind of debrief, demobilize, and thinking through how we can engage in that process to instill better practices for the longer run might be helpful, because it's something that we're all going to have to go through. And so where are there opportunities for us to engage, to build in better structures for the next time? Might be helpful guidance or support from BayCAN.
Excellent, good. And you know, a lot of this does go back to what Martha was mentioning a minute ago, that if this is a matter of weeks and a few months, that's one kettle of fish. And if we're 6 months or 12 months or 18 months, because there are different waves to the pandemic or directions that we go that we don't even want to think about at this point, that's a different set of strategies in many ways. So we're focused right now at BayCAN on how to help you now and in the next weeks, but we'll be thinking longer term as well. So thank you all very much for this. We've recorded this, so if you have colleagues that missed it and want to pick up on it, we'll have it up on YouTube and a link on our website very quickly here in the next 24 hours. Thank you. From BayCAN, we appreciate your time and your work, and keep going forward, and keep us in the loop about ideas that you have or things that you need as we move forward. And this is Bruce Reardon signing off for BayCAN for a Thursday afternoon. Thanks, everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.